Mauler is going to basically sum up a lot of his charges with the episode. We're going to do more on the episode. I'm just going to go with this part of it because I think he makes a big boo-boo. And it's very ironic because for a lot of the episode, he's very, very critical in his video essay, and I think that's very well deserved. But I think to try to sound reasonable, he's going to throw in basically some points to D&D. He's going to say, well, they did some good things here. And one of the things he praises for them for is demonstrably probably one of the weakest points within the whole episode. So it's really puzzling why he decided to say these things. I guess he just wanted to sound reasonable. I understand it's a rhetorical strategy. I think it's important to be as accurate as possible in criticizing the episode because really what he says is beyond incredible. So he's actually being too nice. And we're going to see what he says and say, okay, I understand where you're going with this, but I think it was the wrong tack. But I agree with him in principle. So we'll hear him speak and then respond to it.
Somewhere. And what the fuck is this moment? Like, Sam is just lying down on the fucking floor and stabbing a dude he's resting on? Get the fuck up, you useless twat. You spend the whole episode crying your fucking eyes out. You are not Sam the fucking Slayer. What was the implication that Tyrion and Sansa were going to commit suicide, but then they don't? And then we see Tyrion just walking around at one point to confirm they didn't kill themselves? Lol. What the fuck were you doing this whole time, Bran? You were warging for like 40 minutes. What did you do? And what in the holy hell was the amount of fake-out deaths? Game of Thrones is not supposed to do that shit. Was there strong acting, a strong soundtrack, and some great cinematography? Sure. But who the fuck cares when the majority of watchers are complaining that everything was too fucking dark and it only amounts to sprinkling fucking sugar on a turd? You still end up with the worst fucking episode in this entire series, and that's saying a lot. I am so fucking glad that the greatest character, Tywin motherfucking Lannister, is long dead because he would never let something so fucking stupid happen. He would be spinning in his grave if he knew about the tactical diarrhea that spewed from the combined minds of some of the most intelligent, battle-hardened characters in this entire series.
I think the really major question here is there anything good with this episode? And I would agree, the acting actually was pretty strong. The script was terrible, but you do believe, insofar as you can believe, the psychology of these characters, because even though what they do makes absolutely no sense and is really illogical, it was well performed. So the performances were actually pretty good, even if the writing itself was really, really bad. But now let's key in on the different aspect here, which is really the directing. Because as bad as D&D are, they didn't technically direct this whole episode. So that's going to fall on the director and the cinematographer as to why they made these puzzling decisions. So, but let me also be critical of Mauler, because again, we want to be even-handed. And he says it's good cinematography, but then says, well, people are complaining they can't see stuff. So I'm a little confused. That's a big self-contradiction. If you're saying, well, it's good cinematography, but people can't see it, I'm not quite sure he understands what he's saying. Cinematography is basically just lighting things. I mean, you can say it in a very fancy way. That's really all it is. You're choosing how to position lights to get certain images. And in this one, for whatever reason, they decided the less amount of lights is going to be better. Now, I understand what they're trying to do, and I think it's not even a stupid idea in principle, but really when you think it through, it doesn't make sense with the show, and it definitely didn't make sense in this episode. So what's going on? Well, I think the answer is pretty simple, if pretty stupid, which is that, well, the Night King and the zombies represent darkness. So to represent the darkness of quote-unquote the monster, we're going to make the literal darkness of the episode reflect the darkness of the characters. And you're like, okay, that might make sense, except we've seen the White Walkers a lot of times in sunlight. We've seen them well lit. We've seen the Night King in the sunlight. It's not like the Night King is always draped in darkness. Sometimes he is and sometimes he's not. But even if we don't look at the Night King, well, what about the Mountain? You know, the Mountain when he's a zombie? We see him in daylight. He moves around in daylight. He's well lit. He's in the sunlight. So if your point here is the zombies always have to be in the darkness, that's not true. They were totally fine in the sunlight. Granted, the lighting was a little differently. It was a little darker, but you could still see stuff, and they were clearly in daylight. I mean, why would Season 8 be different? Are the zombies now magically different? Is the Mountain not a zombie? I think he's a zombie. He's not following the Night King, but I think he's canonically a zombie. So you can show zombies in daylight. George Romero showed zombies in daylight all the time. He even has a whole film called Day of the Dead. So I'm really beyond puzzled why they think zombies are related to darkness, because they're not. They're not vampires. So even if we went down their whole kind of argument that, oh, it's a, they're making the metaphor literal. It's very sophisticated. It's like, no, it's not. It contradicts their own episodes in past seasons. It doesn't make any sense. And even the other argument that the cinematographer made that, well, you people don't understand cinema, and it's a certain style. This is meant to be seen in theaters. But we're not seeing in theaters. Most people saw this with a TV screen or an iPad. Are we supposed to spend thousands of dollars because D&D couldn't write a better episode? That doesn't make any sense at all. You're blaming the audience for not having equipment, which is not necessary, because literally this episode could have been a whole lot better doing one simple thing, which is turn on the lights. That's it. Turn on the lights. What would make this episode better? Turn on the lights. This is not that difficult. Just turn on the lights. You don't need to position the lights towards anything. Just turning on any lights would have been a lot better. We literally cannot see anything going on here. Like, beginning to end, the vast majority of this episode is unwatchable. Like, unless you have eyesight or perceptions of a hawk, how in the world do you even know what's happening? I honestly couldn't figure out where the Night King was, where the White Walkers were, where John was, where the dragons are. It's like, I can't see anything. Where's Ghost? I have no clue. I really can't say. So if the whole point here was to make an unwatchable episode, okay, you succeeded. And there is kind of okay cinematography when it's well lit, when they're inside, but even that wasn't that good. So I'm going to have to say the nicest thing you can say is the cinematography was below average and just barely mediocre. So good cinematography? No. Great cinematography? No, definitely not. I think Mauler's just being unnecessarily nice, trying not to get labeled as a toxic fan or a raging YouTuber or whatever. And I think, I understand his point. I understand why he did that, to sound reasonable, but really, this is not the place to sound reasonable. This is probably the best point to be very critical. Here's the thing. Just turn on the lights, you freaking morons. It's not that difficult. Just turn on the light switch. Okay? You got it? It's not that hard. All right. This has been Garmin Thrones Analyzed on the light question in the long night. And I can't even believe we're debating this. Does anybody actually make the argument we needed more darkness in this episode? Maybe somebody does. Maybe D&D will actually have an interview later on and say, hey, I don't know, we made a mistake. There was not enough darkness in this episode. Well, there you go. You succeeded in making an insanely unwatchable episode. Worst episode? No, I don't even think it's top 10, but top 20 worst episode? Oh yeah, this is definitely making the top 20. No doubt about that.
Just in terms of its utter stupidity, it is intergalactically stupid.